Well, hello, students. This is Fitchhorn, and we are going to talk about how to apply filters either individually to photos within a canvas. So this is a new project, essentially. Anytime that you have multiple photos on a artboard, you would want to understand how you can either individually alter those photos through filters of some sort or what's known as image adjustments, or how you can go ahead and put an overall filter layer or adjustment layer is what it's called over the whole entire project. So I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch. I think the first thing I'm going to want you guys to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into my Photopea, and I'm going to go ahead and open up our project that we finished from our last tutorial, where we put our individual alphabet letters to create our names on a canvas, and we saved it as a PSD and JPEG. I need you to open the PSD, which is the working file. The PSD will have all the layers with all the photos in them. And I always tell you how important it is to save the PSD first and then save the JPEG, so that way you are safely saving your work in an appropriate manner that you can always go back and edit. So you'll notice that when you open up the PSD file, which right here your tab is telling you with the extension PSD behind the period, that's your extension, that I still have my letter A there, my letter D, and my letter A here. And this is the canvas, it's locked. We don't need to turn that off for any reason. But you'll notice that as I click each different letter or photograph, each time I click on a layer, if it turns dark, it's called activated. Now, if you want to ever just edit individual photos, which is time consuming, but you might like that effect, you click on the layer of the photo you want to activate and change first. And then when you're editing individual photos only, you go up to Image, Adjustments, and here you can see there's so many adjustments. There's exposure if your photos are too dark or light. There's vibrance if you really want nice vibrant color. There's color balance if the color looks off, like if the photo's too cold or too warm. There's changing your color photos to black and white. I'm going to just choose, and what's fun is the invert and posterize and threshold. Those are fun to play with too. But let's go ahead and, for Pete's sake, just choose a filter. And I want to show you how immediately, once you click filter, it changes it to, by default, both in Photopea and Photoshop, it always chooses this warm, I call it the Instagram look because it's very like vintage and warm like the 70s were. But you can change the density of the filter by toggling the slider. All right, and then you click OK, and you'll notice that the filter is applied directly within the same photo layer, right? So you could turn those off and on. Okay, so you can see whether you like it or not, but then you have to do that for each letter. So if I click on the photograph labeled D, the letter D, then I can make that active and come over here and go Image, Adjustments, and then I go to Photo Filter, and again, it's gonna take it to the goldeny orange, and it's always the density set at one level, so you have to make sure you memorize what levels you're at. And again, notice the filters are applied only on the letter D. And one more time, activate that letter, Image, Adjustments, and let's say you had made every different letter a different color. How to change that is if you click this color thumbnail, this little tile, I double left click in a Mac, and then you choose right within your range here of all the colors in the light spectrum. Make sure you pick one out that's nice and bright. That won't make your photo too dark unless you're trying to go for that. But I'm going to pick a hot pink so you can see the difference. So notice it changed it to that hot pink, like, and the filters are just a filter. It's not painting it that color. It's just a filter. So it's a really subtle way to change something. Okay, so that's cool if you want to work with individual photos, but that could be time consuming. So I'm gonna Command Z. On a PC it's Control Z, but in my Mac it's Command Z, undo. Command Z, it undoes it. Command Z, it undoes it. Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. Okay, see, it only goes back so far until it's all back to normal. This is still kind of hanging out like this, but it's not really going back to where I can get rid of those filters. There, it did. It did actually. Okay, cool. I Command Z back all the way back to my original layers and my background. But let me show you how to apply a filter to the whole stack. Now, remember I told you you have to be in the top photo. It's like stacking photos on a table, one on top of each other, right? So if I apply right here, or is where I create the adjustment layer that will sit and filter on top of all of these. So make sure you're in your top layer and activate it before you go to this little thumbnail icon. I mean, it looks like a black and white cookie. And you find your photo filter and look at that. It applied as a layer, which I can turn off and on to see if I like it by clicking the eyeball. It applied it to all of these. And so if I drag it down underneath the 1A, it's only applied to the D and the first A. If I drag it down below, left click and drag, look, it only applies it there. So do know that there's different ways to create filters on either individual photos by going up to image adjustments up here in your navigation bar, or if you come down to the icons down here within your layers panels, you're going to put the overall like a layer adjustment, which applies to every single layer. Okay, and there's ways to compress things down again, but we'll talk about that another time. That's advanced. So we want to save our work, but we do not want to save it over the original files. So notice this says my original photos were the typography. For you, they'd be in color because I asked you for your originals. But every time you make a change, you click on the name of the file on the tab, and I left click and scroll until I get to the end of the word typography. And this is version 2 of my original. So I put V2. And that changed the PSD. Notice where my mouse is circling that it changed it to version 2 of my PSD. So it's safe to now export it. File, sorry, it's kind of lost in the screen. File, export as JPEG. And make sure, again, the quality should be high in case you ever print any of this stuff out. And hit save. And look at that. It's saving it to my downloads. Now, every time you apply a new layer, let me go ahead and change the layer to something else. Let's say I choose turquoise. And I want to save this version because I want to just show all my different processes. I have to change again. You have to change the name of the file so you don't overwrite the last file. So if I click on the tab, I'm going to change this to my third version. Okay. And it saved my PSD. And now I can go, it's safe. I can go File, Export as a JPEG. And notice it's still the version 3. Yay. 100% quality. Yay. Save. And then every time you make a change, you have to save it as a different version, both the PSD and JPEG, or you'll overwrite old files. So let's say instead of this photo filter, I want to change and add, again, like I showed you, the posterize. Let me show you invert. Invert changes not only the color to its opposite on the color wheel, but it also inverts the positive and negative. So I like that one. Look at that's cool, right? So I'm going to save this as a different version. So click on your name over here, your file name. It's the little tabby tab. And click and scroll till you get to the end. And this one's going to be version 4. And some students like to also add what this is, like what filter you use. So if you label it with invert, you'll know that version 4 was an invert and not just a color. If you ever want to put like behind version 2, cyan filter, version 3, golden, you don't have to. I'm not going to grade you on that. This is for you to keep your files straight so you can remember, what did I do for version? How did I get this in version 4? Because what if you want to apply this to a future creative project, you won't remember how you did it unless you make notes in your file name. I like to do that, but I'm super organized like that. So I'm going to go OK. And now it's safe to save it as file, export as JPEG, sweet, high quality, sweet, save. So let's turn off the invert and the filter. Let's try another filter. Actually, yeah, let me turn off both of these and do one more filter. I'm going to click on this top layer to do another filter. This time I want to show you guys posterize again. Posterize is where you make something look like it's illustrated versus a photo. If you take it too far, it could be a little obnoxious if the light, these are different light values. So it gets a little bit wonky. Like the D is beautiful because there's none of this little scraps of information of like the hot pink or the turquoise. So you got to be careful with that. But if you don't do enough of a posterization, you won't get enough of a change. So there's that. But let's try, let's say you don't want to change something. You're like, I don't really like that. You can either turn off that filter or you can just trash it by left click and dragging the layer you don't like into the garbage can, which is at the bottom right there. That's the garbage can right there. Okay, so let's try one more thing just for fun. We did invert, we did posterize. Let's try threshold. That's also cool. So threshold, look, it did the same thing as posterize, but there's none of those wonky little bits of color in there, right? And if you go too far, well, obviously that's at the end of one spectrum of the threshold of contrast. If you go the other way, it's at the other end of threshold. So you would want to like make sure that you don't lose sight of your overall picture. But yeah, that's threshold. So let's say I keep that and I go again, I change my file name from version 4 to version 5. And then I'm going to make the little note at the end that this was threshold. All right. You go. Now we know that that's safe and it's coming down here. We can go File, Export as JPEG, and high quality, good. All right, and then they go. All right, so I hope that helps with your filters, learning how to put filters on projects and individual photos. Again, one, image adjustments up here creates one, and your layer adjustments creates one that works on top of the whole stack, and you can turn those off and on, and you can drag them into different layers, but obviously you want to be consistent so it's pretty and, you know, overall cohesively aesthetically attractive. And that's it for today, kiddos. See you next time.